Afternoon Session. Singing by the choir and congregation. Now let us rejoice in the day of salvation. No longer as strangers on earth need we roam. Good tidings are sounding to us and each nation, and shortly the hour of redemption will come. Prayer by Elder Elias Blackburn. How firm a foundation, ye saints of the Lord, is laid for your faith in his excellent word, was sung by the choir and congregation. Apostle Lorenzo Snow said in substance that he had been very much edified and instructed by what had been spoken during this conference. The saints had received that kind of information and counsel which every Latter-day Saint needed, and which should be put into practice in our future daily life. The gathering of the saints in these mountain valleys from the various nations of the world was truly a marvel, and we should be the most thankful, seeing the promises which God had made unto those who remained faithful in his cause. The clouds of spiritual darkness which hung over our heads before we embraced the true gospel had disappeared through the outpourings of the Holy Spirit, and our reward would be according to our faithfulness. This church and kingdom, from the day it was organized 62 years ago, had moved forward and continued to progress in the face of the most serious obstacles and difficulties. He had no doubt or misgiving as to the future of this work, for it was the Lord's. The Latter-day Saints might have been guilty of errors in the past, but if they were honest, as was Paul, they would be sustained in making their sacrifice. The Spirit of the Lord was with the Latter-day Saints to guide them aright, and would remain with them if they were humble and faithful as Latter-day Saints should be. The speaker next adverted to the obligations resting upon parents in the training of their children, and urged them to set the young a good example in all things. Everything that was desirable for us in this life was secured by the plan of salvation, which we as a people had received. Let us keep all the commandments which God has given unto us, no matter how great the sacrifice might be. In conclusion, Brother Snow touched upon the subject of temple building, and counseled the people to do their utmost towards helping to complete the Salt Lake Temple by April next. In that holy building, if we properly prepared ourselves to enter there, we should witness most extraordinary manifestations from God, such as had not been seen by any other people for many thousands of years. It would be a lasting shame, after the trials through which this people had passed during the last few years, if we were not in a fit condition to receive those great manifestations of the goodness and power of God when the time should come. Bishop John R. Winder reminded the Latter-day Saints of their pledge made by the resolution at the last April conference to have the Salt Lake Temple finished a year from that date. The committee were making good progress with the building, and it would be ready for dedication on April 6, 1893. Between 200 and 300 men were now employed upon it, and the money contributed by the saints was being carefully expended. There were no better mechanics to be found, and certainly none more faithful in the discharge of their duties than those to whom the work had been entrusted. Having made a careful estimate of the cost, he found that it would require $150,000 to complete the structure. The work now being done was of a costly character, but when finished it would be the most beautiful for the saints to look upon. He trusted that the hearts of this people would be opened, and that they would respond liberally to the cause in hand. President George Q. Cannon spoke next. Following is a brief outline of his remarks. He said that the report made by Bishop Winder regarding the progress made in completing the temple in this city must be very gratifying to all saints. The structure would not be entirely completed by the time named, but would be sufficiently advanced to admit of its being dedicated and work being done in it of the character for which it is designed. It would be further decorated and beautified subsequently. The amount named by Bishop Winder as being needed to complete the work to be done by the 6th of April next might seem large, but when divided out among a people such as we were, it was comparatively small. Through faith much had already been accomplished, and by faith the work in the future could be carried forward to success. The building of the temple at Kirtland, which the Lord condescended to grace with his presence, was a much greater undertaking than the work now being carried on by us, as the people in those days were comparatively few and destitute. A liberal man, we were told, deviseth liberal things, and no doubt we, as Latter-day Saints, were judged by our Father in heaven by the evidences of our faith. On the subject of faith, the speaker instanced that displayed among the elders when they went forth into distant lands without purse or scrip. The Lord had always been with them, and even when trials and difficulties had beset the elders, he had raised up friends in their behalf. The labor of completing this temple rested upon us as a people, and if we would only go to with willing hearts and hands, and with faith and determination to accomplish the object, success would crown our efforts. There was no sacrifice which was too great for us to make for our God, in order to show our appreciation of what he had done for us. Temple work for the salvation of the dead was a binding obligation upon this people. He then spoke on the doctrine of extending the principles of salvation to the dead as well as the living, and quoted from the Scriptures in support of the position taken by the Latter-day Saints on this subject. He showed with great clearness that the path of redemption was intended for all, not only those who heard and embraced it in this life, but that it was carried to the other side of the veil. The ordinances connected with it were administered in their behalf, by those representing the dead in this life in sacred places. This was an important part of the work in which the Latter-day Saints were engaged. Brother Cannon went on to enlarge upon this point, giving many valuable thoughts and evidences of its beauty and efficacy. Satan had determined to bring to naught the plan of salvation, and to destroy this work of God if it were possible. Hence the trials and persecutions which the saints had had to contend with it at every step taken from the beginning, and which had been the means of shedding some of the best blood of the present century. The trials we had passed through already would beset us in the future, but no earthly power could defeat the progress of this great latter-day work, for God had spoken concerning it. Nothing happened to this people without God had foreordained it. He understood it, and had a purpose in calling us to pass through tribulation, and the object would be made known unto us in his own due time. None of us were beyond his blessings, and his plan of salvation was so great that it embraced the whole universe. God had blessed this people with many and great favors, and who would exchange his or her lot for anything the world could offer? In closing his remarks, President Cannon besought the saints to do all in their power to help towards completing the Salt Lake Temple, so that when the 6th of April, 1893, dawned, no debts would remain to embarrass us, no further obligations to meet. Then the building would be dedicated as it should be, and prove acceptable to God, our eternal Father. His Holy Spirit would assuredly rest down upon everyone who took hold of or a part of this noble work. The foregoing synopsis is necessarily a meager one, and only gives a faint idea of Brother Cannon's excellent and instructive discourse. The choir sang the anthem, Jesus, I my cross have taken, benediction by Apostle Heber J. Grant.